Hi, I'm Kelly from Kelly Jones Jewellery. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this pendant. This is the twirl and swirl design that I did a while ago, only this time it's just done with a little bead, and I've added a little dangle bead on there as well. I've put a list in the description below of everything you'll need to make this, along with all the tools that I use, and all the links are there to Facebook and Instagram, and there's a link to my shop which is in the bottom corner of the screen. It's kellyjonesjewellery.etsy.com, where you'll find all my written tutorials if anyone is interested in those. To make this pendant you'll need 0.8mm wire, that's 20 gauge, and I've cut 3 lengths at 11 inches, that's 28 centimetres. You'll need 0.315mm wire, which my weaving wire is 28 gauge. You need about 400 centimetres. Round mine onto a bobbin. If you don't have a bobbin, don't worry. These are it's a Bobeeze bobbin by Beadsmith. It just stops the wire flailing about while you're working. I've got one 8mm bead, I've got a 5mm bead, and I've got 3mm bead. So I've got 5 3mm beads and a jump ring. So I've remembered the jump ring, so we're off to a good start. And my jump ring is about 8 to 10mm outside measurement, so you can use anything about that size. Tools, I've got my my pliers, round nose pliers, wire cutters. I like to have nylon pliers handy for flattening weaves and straightening wires. If you don't have these, don't worry, it's not important, you can just use your fingers. My tools are Tronex. I've put a list in the description below of my tools. I don't put links on there anymore, but I've put a list, so if you want to have a look into more of the tools that I'm using, then have a look below. So if you take your 3 main wires, your 3 base wires, and put your thumb in the centre position, we're going to start weaving about 1 inch to the left of your thumb. So now take your weaving wire, and we're going to start with 3 wraps around that bottom wire. And then wrap around your bottom 2 wires. Bring your wire up between those bottom 2 wires and go over the top, so you wrap around the top 2 wires. And that's our repeat. You wrap around the bottom 2, come up in between, wrap around the top 2. Can I ask everybody while I've got a minute, when you're showing your work online made for my tutorials, could you please mention me, a Kelly Jones design, and could you please not show images of the back or in progress? Please don't show anybody how you actually make the pendant, how you give it, because it will be giving the design away, and I prefer that people came here and watched my video. So thanks to everybody in advance, and I don't mean to moan, and yep, please mention me. Thanks guys. So I've just repeated that weave, and I've done about 1 inch of that weave, so that's about 2.5 centimetres. Just gonna flatten it off a little, and remember to keep pushing your weave together as you work. So now bring your wire up between the bottom 2 wires and wrap around that middle wire. I've wrapped around it twice, and then take this bottom wire and bend it directly down. And now we'll continue to weave across these 2 wires. So we'll go once around the 2 wires, and then once around the bottom wire, and that's our repeat. Once around the 2 wires, once around that bottom wire. So repeat that for about another inch and keep pushing it together as you work. So I've repeated that weave and I've done about an inch. So that's another 2.5 centimeters of that weave, and keep pushing your weave together as you work to keep it all nice and tidy. So we're going to finish that weave with a couple of wraps around the bottom wire, but we'll just make sure the weave is long enough to go around the bead. So get your larger bead, your 8mm bead, and pop it on that bottom wire there. I've got a really sparkly blue goldstone. It's quite lovely. Good for the video. So take your weave, try and find the middle of that top weave, and then bend the top part over, because you want to bend it over, but you want it to bend pretty central really. This bottom wire that's got our bead on, that can be bent straight down. And then this weave, we need to come over the top, so then it meets, the wire's risen a little bit, so it meets there, and we got like a scoop, a nice scoop at the bottom there. And then all the wires come together on this side. So all my wires are really crossing over here, and it's going to be hard to work with. So making sure that this bottom weave is really compressed, and I'm just going to pull these wires over and out of the way for now, so I can just work across these three. I need to cut that weaving wire there. Get rid of that. So then this part here needs to come down and meet there, and then we're going to go across the 3 wires. So I'm just adjusting my wires for weaving. I need to make sure I've got the 2 wraps around the bottom wire. So at this point you may need to add a little bit to your weave if your beads are different size, or if you want a slightly different amount of bend in that bottom bit, you'll be able to add or take away a bit of weave, whatever you want to do. So now we're going to work across the 3 wires. Just currently finished a written tutorial for this moon. It's a 35-page tutorial with over 150 pictures to follow along in your own time. If you fancy having a look at that, if you fancy the challenge, pop on over to my shop and have a little look. I am running a sale at the minute. I've put 20% off this particular one. So we're just going to copy the other side now on this side. So keep pushing your bead down, because you don't want this middle wire to go up. Mine keeps rising up. So we're going to go around the bottom 2 wires, up between those 2 wires, and around the top 2. So just as you did on the other side, we're going to do the same weave, and we're going to do the same length. So we'll need an inch of that weave. So I have done an inch of weave on that side too, and keep pressing your weave together as you go. I'm copying this side, so I need to finish with 3 wraps around that bottom wire. So keep pressing your weave together. I'm going to bend those wires out as I did on the other side. So this is what we've got so far. And hold in the middle and hold in the bead. I'm just going to pull those 2 sides in equally. And then we're going to take the outer wire on both sides and pull it down out of the way for now. And then where those wires meet, we're going to put the one side on top of the other. I'm going to have 2 wires going out in one direction and 2 going out in the other direction. And then where those wires cross, I'm going to take this weaving wire and go around the whole thing. So I'm going around all 4 wires, tying it all together. I'm going to separate those wires a little. And I'll go a few times around the bottom wire just to tie it all together. So that's what we have so far. So I've gone 3 times around the bay, the whole thing, and then I'm going to go 3 times around the bottom wire. So that's what we've got so far. So now we're going to work across all 4 wires to make ourselves a nice little bail. So we're going to go over the second wire there, so we've wrapped around the bottom 2, and then come up between and go around that second wire. So now we'll go over the 3rd wire and we'll go around the both wires and then around that bottom wire again. By bottom I mean the 3rd one, because I was talking about the top 2. Now we'll move to the bottom 2, so we come over that 2nd wire. So we go around the 2nd wire, around both wires, and I go around, again around the 2nd wire. Then we move up to the top 2, so we go around that 3rd wire, around the 2, and around that 3rd wire. So that's what we're going to keep doing. And as you're working, keep pushing your weave together as you go. Try not to let these wires actually come together, because then you're going to bend all your weave. You crimple all that weave. You'll see it start to take shape in a minute. So keep doing that weave over the opposite inner wire, around both wires, and then around that inner wire again. So I've just kept repeating that weave, and you do have to be careful that you don't pull your wires together, because you want to keep all these centre weave wires nice and straight. So this is going to be our bail. This is the part where your cord or your chain will go through, and this can be as big or as small as you like. So do as much weave as you want to for the size of your bail, and when you get to this part, I'm happy with the size of that. You must keep pressing your weave together as well as you go to keep it nice and neat. Holding the wire, we're going to bend the top part of it in. Do that for the both sides. So now your wires shape to make a V. And you've got to really try and not let those wires come together in the middle, because they'll squash all those weaving wires. So when you're happy with your diamond shape that you've made, hold the wires at the top and bend the wires back out. I'm going to bend the bottom wires down a bit so it's easier to weave with. So now we're going to carry on weaving. Same weave as the bail all the way up to this neck point here. Only now as you work, because you're working down the wires, your weaving wire is going to keep sliding. So as you work, hold down the weave on the other side. So I'm going to hold that side there, and I'm going to work this side. So I need to make sure I push it all the way down to the bottom. And then I want to go around the one wire, around the two, and then around that inner wire. So we're still doing the same weave. And now going over to that side, I need to hold this side, because this is the bit now that's going to try and slide up. And I need to go, I'll try and keep my wire loose until I get there, and then I'll pull it through. And we'll go around the bottom wire. Again, I'm trying to keep the wire a bit loose so that it doesn't go tight and end up here. I don't want any gaps. So we get it in place, it's starting to go. So you get it in place and then you kind of pull it tight afterwards, if that makes sense. So then we go around the two wires and then around the single wire. You've got to keep pushing it together as you go. And then I'm going to hold this side. So keep working in this kind of crazy manner all the way until you get to the top of your bail. So I've continued that weave to the top, and as you can tell, I've still got little gaps. See the little gaps between the weaves. It's not as tight and tidy as the bottom part. I'm never happy with this part. It's always got a few gaps on there, but we're okay because the top part is going to be the back, because we're going to bend this over now. Oh, that's the next thing I meant to say. I forgot to mention bail pliers. If you've got bail pliers, fantastic. If not, then just you can bend this weave like over a pencil, or if you've got a crochet hook, knitting needle, paintbrush, anything like that kind of lying about, bend the weave straight over whatever it is you've got that's that kind of size. So that's what we've got so far. So now if you turn to the back, I'm going to go and wrap around the whole thing, but we don't need to include these outer wires or these wires. So we're going to wrap around those middle wires and the rest of it, so the wire comes around and sits where do we want it to sit. We just want it to go around the whole thing really, just to hold this bail down, so we only really need to go around a few times. So we don't want to include this outer wire here, and then we go all the way around and we come up between these two wires. I'll just do that once more. So I'm just wrapping around the main thing and the two back wires really, just to hold the bail down. And then when you're done, come up between these two and I'll wrap a few times around one of the wires on this side, just to finish off the weave and keep it in place. I'll cut that wire. Flatten down the end. So now we're going to take these top two wires that were originally left. I'm going to start with this one on this side. I'm going to take it across to the other side, scoop it around in a little loop, and then bring it over this side. And then the other wire, I'm going to do the same with that one. I'm going to bring it over to this side and I'm going to go around that loop that we've just made. just making it just a little bit bigger than that loop. I'm going to take it over to this side. So that goes over that side and that goes over this side. And I think it's best if they go below those two wires that are there. And then you just need to level that up, because I've just putting the wires up and then pulling them down, I've made it a little bit wonky. So you've got this nice little double loop in the middle. So when you're happy with the shape of those loops, hold it in place, but don't squash this weave. You want to try and not press this weave together or bend it. You want to try and not really touch it. So I'm pinching it together at this point here. And we're going to take this wire around, I'm just going to secure it around that middle weave. So I'm just pulling that wire around that middle weave section best I can without misshaping everything else, and I'll do the same for the other one. Pull it around that middle weave section and pull it around nice and tight, and then bend the wires over the back. So they just finish off around those side weaves, and then where they come across the back, cut your wire and we're just going to bend them a little bit around there just to finish them off and squeeze them down in place. Do that for both sides. Looking at mine, the top was a bit wonky, so I've put my pliers back in to level up the top. So if you want to reshape it, make sure to put your pliers back in, otherwise you could bend all this weave out of shape. So now looking at these two wires on this side, we're going to pull them directly up. I'm just going to straighten them with my pliers. And then we're going to take this bottom wire and we're going to loop it to go around like that. So we just put like a nice bend into it, and then on this wire I'm going to add 3 of my little 3mm beads. Oh, they're hard to catch. They normally end up across the floor. So we've got 3 beads on there. And then as the wire comes across here, I'm going to take it around. So I'm bending it up. And I'm going to add another bead there. So I've got a bead on that loop there. And then as the wire comes down here, I'm going to go around the other way. And as the wire gets into a loop, I'm going to add my last bead. And carry on with that wire around to finish off that loop. And then the wire's going to carry on down there. I do like having a bit more wire length than this. When I'm working, I've cut that wire a bit short, but there's still plenty there for the design. So we've got a bit of a curly whirly with that wire and a few beads on it. So now we're going to go to the other of those 2 wires that we were working on, and we're going to add coils. So take your weaving wire, and we're just going to spin it around. It's hard to show you so close. So we're just going to add coils. So we're just going to wrap around and around and around. I think we need to add quite a bit to start with, just to get it around the main shape, and then we can add more as we go. So if we add the bulk of it now. So what I've done is about 1 inch there. Probably just a bit less actually, and I'm going to cut the beginning off now, because as soon as it's in place it's really hard to get to that beginning wire. So I've cut the beginning of the wire, slide it down into place, and this is going to follow the shape. I can add more coils than that, I think. I'm going to add a bit more, easier to add it at this end. The bobbin's got stuck in my pocket. So I'm going to slide it down into place. I want these 3 beads to sit up there. So this is going to shape around to follow this other wire. And we'll keep these 3 beads higher than the weave, because we're going to go behind that wire. And then there, that's ideal really. We need to reattach, and it's best to attach before the bead really. So we'll go around the 2 wires. Can you see that? Going around the 2 wires. And then we'll go back just around that single wire. So this is going to be awkward to add coils to now. So we've attached there. Now I need to keep adding more coils. So for a few coils I'm going to have to keep to-ing and fro-ing behind this wire. I'll pull it forward a little bit. So I've added a few more coils, so I've got to there. Now I'm going to follow this wire. So I'm going to bring my weaving wire underneath there so I can wrap around the 2 wires. Then I'll go back up between them so I can add more coils to this one. And it is moving around quite freely, so I need to attach it to that back weave as well. So I'll cut a bit off, leaving leaving a bit of length for the last of my coils. And I'll go holding it against the weave. I'll go through the weave. And then I'll go around the weave and back up between those two wires. I want it to go that side, that's it. And then I'll carry on adding coils to that wire. When I get to this point, I'll go around the two wires, and I think they're just long enough for me to finish them off, but I will advise that you start with slightly longer wires, and I'll add that in the notes at the beginning. So I'm just going to cut a little bit off that one because I don't quite want it that long for the curl. And this one is going to go the other way. So I'll add a few more coils to that wire. Keep pushing it together, and then when it gets to that point, I'm going to go through the middle and just attach to that bottom part so that I'm tying it down. So then I'll bring it back up and around that wire a few more times. Cut that weaving wire. Now I need to curl some wires. So this one I want to curl this way. I'll curl the end first, and then I'll pull the wire up. And then this one I'll curl this way. So that's my curly swirly bit done for now. So with these two remaining wires, I'm going to pull them straight forward, and then one at a time, holding this again at the centre part, so I'm not going to squash the bail. I'm going to pull it straight over and scoop it around in that direction. And then I'm going to do the same for the top one. Bend it straight over and scoop it around too. I think I'm going to add another bead to that wire, so I need another 3mm bead. So I've added a bead to that outer wire. And then I'm going to take both of these wires, holding the front in place, I'm bending them around to the back. I'm going to finish off those wires around that side weave, I think. So I'm going to cut them off just to make it easier on myself. You can wrap them around if you like, but my swirl with the bead on is very close there and it's going to get in the way. So I'm going to curl these around, and I'm holding that in place as I'm bending this wire so I don't misshape the front when I do this, but I'm just taking them around that weave with my pliers. It's just a little bit easier when it's so tight. So I've pulled them around, I have put some tool marks in there, and I'm just going to bend them around the back and squeeze them in place. So I've pulled those wires around the side and I'm just going to bend them into place now around the weave. So I've decided to add the little bead as like a little dangle droplet on the bottom because it's so long and thin and elegant, this one. I'm going to make it a little bit longer with the extra bead on the bottom. So take another piece of base wire, and I'll make sure to add it to the list at the beginning. This is 4 inches of the 20 gauge, which is the 0.8mm wire. You need to pop your bead on there. I'm just going to wrap the wire. So I've got probably just 1.5 inches on the one end. So I'm just going to wrap the wire around the bead. Go all the way around the edge of the bead, and then when you meet the other wire back up at the top, we're going to go around that wire. It's a bit fiddly to hold. We're going to go around that wire. So I've just made a little dangle really. Cut that wire off nice and short. Oh dear. And then squeeze it all nice and tight in place. It's so fiddly to hold, especially with my nails. I hope you can see. I'm just squeezing it around that top wire. Not having much luck with this at all, am I? And I'm not going to delete it out because I don't want you all to think that wire work isn't a struggle, because it is. It's not as easy as some of us make it out to be. And I do try and hide my mistakes from you all. So there we have it, just a little bead dangle droplet. And then I'm going to take my round nose pliers, kind of grabbing it about midway. And I'm going to wrap that wire around the pliers so I get a loop on the top, and then I'm going to cut it where that loop finishes there. So we can attach that to the top there. So at least I'll mention the jump ring if I forgot about the extra bit of wire. So you can use whatever size jump ring you like. Mine's quite big. I do like this chunky wire that we make the jump rings out of. I use 1.5mm wire. I do think it's a bit overkill. You could probably use a bit less of a size. I do like how chunky it sits though. So I've got a proper little dangle on the bottom of mine. I might put a smaller jump ring on that, looking at it, because my bead's only tiny. Right, I have put a smaller jump ring on the bottom, and I think that's really quite cute, and I like that. So I'm going to run and oxidise this now, and I should come back and show you. So there we have it finished, and I've oxidised it. If you want to oxidise yours, I'll put a link in the description below. I'll put a link at the end of the video as well. I've done a couple of videos on oxidising now. It just brings out all the detail and all the dark tones. I always love oxidising copper and sterling. So I hope you find this tutorial easy to follow and I didn't confuse you too much. And please subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate all you guys, all of your support, and I shall see you all in the next one.